Good morning and welcome to Leadership Line of Sight. My name is Taylor. I'm the marketing strategist at Gravidia, and I take this time to talk to people that are amazing examples of leadership. I think leadership lives within us all, and because of that, I want more people to be able to recognize it early. And I think that comes from getting so many examples of people sharing that part that are credible examples of leadership, and that brings us to our guest today. Today, we have Laura Kilcrease. She's the CEO of Alberta Innovates, and also has spent so much time in a booming tech community in Austin, Texas. I'm really interested to see what you see, Laura, when you take a look at your next vision coming from where you've come so far. Welcome to Leadership Line of Sight.
Thanks, Taylor. I'm glad to be here with you this morning. Hey, interesting. Perhaps, I give a little bit of history, it might be helpful. And I specifically refer to what you're talking about, Austin, Texas. Many years ago, I moved to Austin directly from the UK, from England. And, that's a bit of a shock moving from London to Austin, Texas, to say the least. But what I found was nuggets of opportunity that perhaps weren't always noticed by the locals. Essentially, when I moved there was about only 400,000 people or so in Austin. And Wow. We'd gone through 2 oil and gas busts, which even though Austin isn't an oil town per se, it is because it's in the largest oil producing state in the US. And so the effects of the boom in oil and gas affected the banks, the real estate values, the buildings that were going up, everything. And so after the second oil and gas downturn, which very frankly is very predictable because it's a very cyclical industry, a few of us got together and said, look, we can't do this anymore. So back in the late 80s, Austin, 400,000 people, 1,000 homes foreclosed a month because people couldn't pay their mortgages or couldn't pay their rent. People couldn't find jobs, and yet we had the same stable old economy. And we said, a few of us got together and said, we got to change this. We know oil's going to come up again. We know it's going to go down again. Let's diversify now. So we started the work back then in diversification. We did it in many, many different ways, and I can get to that if you're interested. But today, Austin is over 2.2 million. The surrounding areas, towns are driven by what happens in Austin. Oracle's headquartered there. Apple's got a campus with almost heading up to 13,000 people. It's still a great music city and music vibe. There's Formula One for those who love, car racing. I mean, all kinds of stuff is going on there. And economically, it's strong. So when 2008 and 9 came and the downturn happened again across the country, frankly, no effect in Austin. Now, no effect in Austin. Well, there is an effect. I should take that back. The effect is it's still continuing to grow. 189 people are moving there every day. 180. Think about that. You're talking 50, 60,000 people a year. And at the moment, with sadly the downturn in California, where about 17% of the population has moved out of California in the last year, mainly, San Francisco, certain particular pockets, we're getting a further influx, Texas and specifically Austin. So all that groundwork we laid, is been working for 2 decades, almost 3 decades now, actually, but it's really coming to prove to be beneficial. So I just think, and I could give you other examples, but, it doesn't take many people to make those things happen. And I would tell you, it's not just me. There was less than a dozen of us who came together, said, we got to make a change. We got to do something different. Why? Because we lived in the place. If this is our home, and we want this to be a strong place, we got to make sure we don't have that boom bust. And now you'll find the economy is very diversified, not just from oil and gas to tech, but every area of tech and even consumer products and other areas that perhaps you wouldn't have thought about. So it
Wow.
can be done, and it doesn't take a lot of people, but it does take people working together.
Okay, so that comes into something that you had introduced to me. Can you define creative collisions?
Okay. So creative collisions can't always be planned. You can't force a creative collision. But what you can do is put the right people in the right environment, and without even making it happen, they will naturally glom together. It's like a north and south magnet. You don't know over what exact topic or what exactly the outcome will be, but you put them in that environment where they can actually meet and collide, then it's amazing what can happen. And we do that at our conference called Inventures. So we bring investors, entrepreneurs, large company buyers, technologists, researchers, and we put them in an environment where they're learning something new, they're meeting someone new, they're asking questions about how they can apply some new innovation to their own businesses, or discussing a problem, a challenge they have. And before you know it, over a cup of coffee, a beer, a glass of wine, sitting next to someone new at lunch, you suddenly find, oh my God, there's an affinity, there's a collision here. And before you know it, they're talking about working together or hiring one another or finding something new out. The last time we have the actual results pre-pandemic was 2019 in our second conference, our second Inventures. And we had $246 million come from 2.5 days of creative collisions within that first 12 months post that conference. As you could probably tell, I'm very results oriented. So I like to see, was it worthwhile? Did we put the right people in the right rooms? Did they come? Did they break bread? Did they really solve something that they needed to solve?
So when you take a look at crafting an environment or making an atmosphere where these creative collisions happen, you reference conferences. So in Ventures, if it's like the other tech conferences that I've seen that do really good or really well with this, like I remember my first exposure to South by Southwest.
Mm-hmm.
I was flown in not even knowing what it was.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I was there to help Eris MD with writing them a pitch and training with Scott to deliver it. And it was going to happen right away. And it was very important and the stakes were really high.
So that's a great example. You got the first key ingredient, a great pair of entrepreneurs, people who are passionate about what they're doing, know where they need to go. But the path from where they are today to where they need to go is not a linear path, even though we all think it is. So knowing that path is going to be windy and curved and sometimes good and perhaps sometimes not so good. And by the way, I've never seen a great company that hasn't had troubles along that way, along that path. You have to find the other people that would benefit a creative collision with them.
Yeah, because it's almost like we don't know what the idea will be. We don't know what it will turn into. We just know what it takes to make good ingredients. And you're saying that a pair of entrepreneurs is part of it, right?
Absolutely. I mean, entrepreneurs are a special breed of human being, right? They're committed, they're passionate, they believe in what they're doing. They're typically solving a problem that they've observed or experienced or a family member has. And so it's a question of taking that idea or concept of that problem solution and then testing it. Well, first of all, making it into reestablishing there's a real market for it, then testing it or make it into a minimum viable product, and then actually finding a way to get it to that customer at a price and in a manner that they really want. And there's lots of danger along that path, right? There's lots of landmines they can fall into by accident. But most entrepreneurs, if they fall into a hole that they hadn't expected, they pick themselves up and then they keep going. The great entrepreneurs know that when the hole's too deep, when to stop.
Oh, wow. So when you're talking about the beginning of this, where it takes an entrepreneur and really you can define them by grit, right?
Yeah, grit.
And then And then after that, you're talking about them experiencing the problem. Do you think that uncommon like perception of the problem is a key element where it's like a family member that's being affected and they're creating a solution?
I think that just gives them more commitment around that solution. But I think if they see a problem in any other way and they're that kind of creative individual, they'll and it something that kind of, how can I say, gels with them, that they can appreciate. I think they'll go work that regardless whether it's coming from a family member or not. And
So
I'm sorry.
Oh, so that takes us to like the next part, which is like where we get into things like target market fit.
Yes.
But I want to wrap this back to where you're dedicated, which is that you're really looking to help support these creative collisions and then help them through those steps, right? Because you know that it's always tumultuous.
Absolutely. So Alberta Innovates today, we call ourselves the innovation engine for Alberta. And what we're trying to do is drive not just prosperity today, but prosperity for the future, which we too believe is some diversification. You know, I just see in Alberta, there's diamonds in the rough. They look like rocks because they're not polished. And so we kick the rock along the road and don't realize we've actually got a diamond there. So let's pick it up and polish it and do something with it. And we do something with the diamonds at many different levels. So at the simplest form, but often the most difficult, we actually look at funding research at the universities, predominantly postdoctoral students, graduate students, because you don't just need the research and the pioneering research that takes often a long time, but you need the labor force that will go with it. An example of that is we actually started funding all the artificial intelligence work in Alberta 20 years ago at the University of Alberta. We are now, through AMI, the not-for-profit we helped stand up, which bridges the university research into industry, we are now the #2 in North America of machine learning and reinforced learning in this province, Alberta, and one of the top 3 centers across the country. And so we don't know it, but there's artificial intelligence all around us. And machine learning and reinforced learning is one of the heightened uses of that at the moment. But that's what I call on the 1 to 30 year scale. You start with a researcher or researchers, you have a goal, you don't know exactly when you're going to get there. We go along that, we progress from there, and we look at funding commercialization of research into real products, real companies. And it can be either. It could be a product a large company gets, it can be something a small company starts with and tries to grow, an entrepreneurial company. We then look at programs for entrepreneurs at 2 levels, directly for the company and for the ecosystem in which they live. An example there is we recently, late last year, funded 5 accelerators around the province. Accelerators aren't new. I started my first accelerator in Austin, Texas, way back when I was telling you we started to diversify the economy. But we needed very specific accelerators from our research. We had some gaps in our marketplace. So one of the gaps is we need an accelerator from ideation up to a real product. Then we needed from a real product to real sales. Then we needed from real sales to get more of our companies to the 100 million in revenue than we'd ever seen before. And we have been not as strong in this phase. And in fact, Canada generally is not as strong. And so we looked at these phases for scale up and growth. And we also looked them in market specific market areas. So we put that in place, and that's part of the ecosystem. But we also have a regional innovation network where people can go out and help companies. But then the companies may have an idea and can't afford to patent their idea. And we will give the company directly a grant to patent it. So we're looking at think of a different form of inventures. We're looking at the context in which they live and what they need, and we're looking at them at the same time and how to grow. From that, we start to then scale the companies further, And then finally, we have our own labs. We have over 1 million square feet of labs and researchers, which will solve industry's real problem, real time, and test those solutions. So you have a barrel of oil and you want to do something with it. Hey, we can test it. We can take it to 100 barrels, to 14,000 barrels, or we can say, we don't want to burn that oil. We're going to create something called bitumen beyond combustion. We're going to take the carbon fibers out of that. And we've been working on that. And if any of you come back and talk to me in a few years from now, you'll see that this province will be exporting billions of dollars in carbon fiber as a result of the inventions that have started at the beginning of the journey I suggested.
Wow, what a statement. Come back in a few years and there'll be billions of dollars in evidence.
Yeah. Oh my God. Even now, Taylor, we touch 63% of all the tech entrepreneurs in this province in one form or another. We're so proud of what they're doing because they're making a difference. They're not just creating jobs for, your friends, my friends' kids, their grandkids. We're actually looking at jobs of the future, not just jobs of the past. And so it's a robust cycle, but that cycle is a long cycle. Typically, it's somewhere in the 1 to 30 years. Not everyone takes that whole cycle. We described artificial intelligence as has been a 20-year cycle, and now firmly artificial intelligence is being used in all manners. But we do this in agriculture, in oil and gas, in clean tech, in emission reduction, in startup businesses. You think of it, and we probably have a connection. Every day we're running over 800 projects in these different areas.
I want to get a handle on your perception of this, because I imagine that this is far different than what it was the first time. So can you take us back into when you were starting out in Austin, Texas?
Yeah.
So that's something that you had great impact. You were saying that the numbers, it's 10x as far as its population alone, right?
Yeah. So one of the keys is if you want to grow an environment and you see the key ingredients, and I think the key ingredients are very simple. Talent, the people, technology, the innovation. You need some capital. You need some money to get things going. And then what's more important is you need the know-how, the glue that hangs this together, the expertise, whether it's legal, accounting, finance, marketing, communications, production, whatever it is. And if you can bring those 4 elements together, you can create either a successful company or a successful environment. But the key is in what area? And what area are you going to do that? And often we think about doing everything for everyone at the same time. And you may even say we as a corporation are a broad corporation. But we come from an innovation perspective. So we look at innovation as different platforms that could apply to different industries or different stages of companies at different times. And so you have to know more sometimes about what you don't want to do to narrow down to make sure you know what you want to do.
That sounds like you took that from your last experience.
Yes.
I think one of the most effective ways to gain experience is to make every mistake, but none of them twice.
Yeah. I say to the people around me, make a mistake once, no big deal. We're there for you. We all have to learn. Make mistake twice, well, you may have just not got all the lessons. Make this mistake 3 times, sorry, you're out. You're not learning at all. And what we have to do today as individuals, as organizations, we have to be continually in learning mode. So what I learned from Austin is we picked the first 3 industries to diversify the economy back in the 90s. And they were hardware, a laptop, that kind of hardware, software, and semiconductors. Semiconductors is also a very cyclical industry. But we felt these were the first 3 companies where we had a semblance of research from universities and corporations. We had a semblance of talent, but we didn't have enough thriving new companies in this field. Those companies back in those days that you wouldn't have heard of and you wouldn't have known their name are companies like Dell Computers. I think they just reached the $85 billion mark. And Advanced Micro Devices, who've just got awarded the #1 semiconductor company in the country, or at the CES show earlier this year. But there's others. There's many others.
And those are like when it comes to all the companies and the sizes that they get to, like those are giant companies.
They're giant companies today. But when Michael Dell started, he wasn't a giant company. He was like you and me. And he had a vision and a passion and what he needed to do. And not everyone gets to that size. And that's good too, because you need everyone in the ecosystem to work. But we started with those 3 areas because we had some competencies on what we talked about. Now, once we got those done, we moved into other areas. So in 2001, we moved into clean tech. We actually opened the first clean tech accelerator in the US. And we said, we got to get some new ideas here. And so we moved the different industry stages along as to what the next area of growth would be. We didn't try and say, hey, there's 20 market areas, we're going to do them all at the same time.
And is that where the Austin Technology Incubator comes in?
Yeah. So the Austin Tech Incubator, ATI, which still runs today, 32 years later. I started in '89. We've exited more than $3.5 billion of corporate wealth into the community. It is a not-for-profit affiliated with the University of Texas. And there's probably just as much wealth within the existing companies that haven't, sold or gone public yet. But it's a deep tech incubator. It's about incubating deep tech that can have some really profound differences. So one of the early techs that one of the first 3 actually was 3D printing. And
no way.
So Desktop Manufacturing was the company that's subsequently sold to 3D Systems. Actually went public, took private, sold again over the years. But yes, it was a laser sintering technique, which is one of the 5 techniques. And even back then, we envisioned that everyone would have a 3D printer, just like we have a paper printer. Now, we're not quite there. I don't have one of them in my home, I have to tell you, Taylor. But you can go anywhere and get access to a 3D printer to prototype your plant, to show what your new product might be, to test how parts fit, or indeed to print some real life thing that you need.
Wow. So when you take a look at setting up that project, you were talking about those early stage development supports, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of these companies, as their startups, as soon as they start looking at income streams, now you need accountants, right? Even before then, there's patents and lawyers.
Yep.
What are the other things that when companies are out there that are startups, I don't know that enough of them recognize what help looks like. What does it normally look like? What do you think the biggest things are that are solved in those situations?
Well, I think this is where a group of people have an obligation to figure out what's needed in that environment. And the entrepreneur's too busy building their company. The big company's too busy finding a solution to their problem. And we need to find ways that we can have those creative collisions. We can connect them. We can get them to that right next source of help they need, whether it be an angel investor, a venture capitalist, a customer, a proof of concept. And this is where I think these other people in the ecosystem come into play to connect those dots. And in the world today, we're more networked than we've ever been before. So connecting that dot might be someone in Berlin or London or Austin, Texas, not just Silicon Valley or Portland or India or China. And so we have to get the right people, because it's the time compression in both learning and the time compression to sustainability that becomes important.
Okay, so this is something that I don't know that a lot of companies would understand as startups. They understand that these things can offer support, and they are thinking about like the business side of it, but the network and communicating with people that have been where you're going and can kind of be your eye in the sky.
Yep.
I think that that's one of the hardest things for those startups, is where they start to run out of what's the word I'm looking for? Room to rise. Like it's almost like their plane is taking off from the tarmac, and all of a sudden the money's running out.
Yeah.
And if they make a few wrong turns at that moment, it's over. Like they just don't have enough resources.
Absolutely. And every business will go through that, and will go through it more than once. More than once. Great businesses always do. Dell Computers went through that several times. It wasn't just an overnight success, with on an easy path. And that's where the management and skills and leadership come in. Leadership is key here, of how you navigate. Leadership is not perfect, but leadership, if you really know what you need to achieve and you can keep your focus on achieving it, even if the plane gets pushed by the wind over to one side a little bit, you'll still be able to take off and take control of that plane back again. Now, companies do naturally run out of resources, and the biggest resource they run out of is actually people and intellectual talent. That's to me far more important than money. Money's a commodity, right? And people will say to me, yes, so what? I can't live without it. Well, it's true. I have to buy food. I can't live without it. I need money too. But if it's money alone, you're looking at the wrong thing. It's what you're trying to do with your talent and who your customer or your centric view on your customer is as to what they need. And if you can match these things up, then I think you will attract the financing, no matter how hard it will get. And again, many entrepreneurs will say, perhaps we don't have enough resources. We don't have enough people in Alberta. And I would say, you have plenty of people in Alberta. You have plenty of people to attract to Alberta. You've got great style of living in Alberta. Your issue is, who do you want to attract and why? And what do they need? Second, money. Money. Well, I'm proud to say that because of our great entrepreneurs here and that ecosystem that's working, in the first 2 quarters this year, we've attracted over double the capital to this province and investments into companies that has previously happened on the next highest year. But more importantly, our numbers have gone up and the rest of Canada has actually gone down. And
so that's something that you were saying, that this is the right environment, right? How much does affordability have to do with that?
Oh, really important. I mean, as a prior venture capitalist for 20 years, I fund a company in Silicon Valley. It cost me 3 times more than funding a company in Austin, Texas to do exactly the same thing, because they pay 3 times more for rent or mortgage, more to put their kids in school, more for their gas or petroleum. Their cost of living is just generally higher. It's a different type of living. Always sunshine in California, so to speak. And it's a lovely place, don't get me wrong. But from a business perspective, and there's many connections in the network that are dense there. So please, it's still a good place. But I know it's going to cost me 3 times more. You come to Alberta, the same principle applies. Toronto, bit more expensive. $1.6 million for the average 2-bedroom apartment, bit out of my budget. Vancouver, fairly similar. Networks are bigger and tighter, but we can get in Alberta, we're almost like the Midwest of Canada, right? And if you look at where the capital is growing in the Midwest of the US and the entrepreneurs and what's happening, there's a greater affinity to help one another. And I think we're in a really good spot for helping one another. So for companies and capital sources to come in. And that's why, frankly, InVentures is just one of several opportunities they come in to visit. This may be surprising, but I held a small dinner at Inventures, which I tend to hold a few small dinners around a particular theme. And this June, I held a capital dinner. And it was larger than I normally have. I normally keep it to about 12 to 16 people. But I actually had 30 people in the room, and we split them into tables. There was over $1 trillion in that room. And most of those people had not been to Alberta before.
Wow.
Now they say, wow, we got mountains, you got companies, you got people who want to talk to me. I'm really interested in that new invention. And since that time, I can just take one of those participants in that room who runs several $100 billion. And we've subsequently got on the line and explained the technology roadmap and what's going on in a particular area to 30 of their top investors, so they can now start to keep an eye out of where they should be looking for future opportunities, not just ones today. So, but you have to break bread, meet the people, explain who you are and what you are and where you're going, and then connect that dot again.
I couldn't agree more. You know, a lot of people don't see what can't be included in email, right?
Yes.
What you lose when you don't get tone of voice and actually being in the moment together.
Yeah.
I like how conferences manage expectations as well, where
Yeah.
people know what mode to be in.
Yeah.
When they arrive, they're like, oh, these are the type of, it's almost like when you go to see a sport. You were talking about Formula One. When I went to Montreal in June, I knew, like, getting onto the plane, you see people in jerseys and things like that. You know that what team they support, that they're involved in that. When you go to a conference, you know that people have to take time out of their day and their life to be here. And the further away they are from here, the more it meant to them to be here.
Exactly. You know, Inventures this June, and it was the first post-pandemic, and we tried to downsize Inventures. To be honest, we failed miserably. We were over 50% beyond our target, over 3,000 people. We were trying to keep it to 2. But regardless, it doesn't matter about the numbers. It matters about the outcome. But we had people coming in from 25 different countries, and it wasn't one person from the country. It was several. And so when we get that global perspective as well, and we add that layer. So we add the layer of Alberta, Canada, and then the global perspective. We've just built networks that we don't know quite yet how are they going to pay back, but they will pay back. And it takes leadership to envision what needs to happen. It takes leadership to, Taylor, to call you and say, hey, you should be here. And you'll go, why? I don't need another conference. No, it's not a conference. It's an unconference. Inventures is the unconference. Come and then tell me, you know, if it made any sense for you. And invariably, we've got people now coming back because it's the unconference about a positive collision.
Sounds like a magnificent environment. I think that the illusion from outside of Alberta is that if you come and take a look at tech here, it will be specific to the industries that happen here.
Well, you know, that's a natural assertion because honestly, they're the ones that have been buying the products from the local companies first. And you always want to sell to a local company first because you want your alpha product to give you real feedback before you get your beta product or your final product. And I think that's true, but I often don't think people think about what those companies are as opposed to what those companies do. So let me give you an example. A couple of years ago, I heard the prior CEO of WestJet talk, and he said, you know, people think we're an airline company. We happen to fly planes. We're actually a digital company because we know more about you digitally before you even get on the plane, where you like to sit, what size seat, what you like to eat, you know, all kinds of things we know about you. We're a digital company first and an airline second. Now, do I personally think of WestJet as a digital company? No, I think of it as an airline because I use it as an airline. But when I thought about what he said, I thought, oh my God, so how many digital software products is he buying? How much artificial intelligence is he using? How is he scraping sites to find out where I want to go next? What's behind all of this? So whether it's an airline like WestJet, a oil and gas company like Suncor, another great example. Hey, aren't they an oil and gas company? Don't they dig that dirty stuff up? Well, yeah. But Suncor also runs the Enerchem plant, which is taking municipal trash, converting it to electricity and saving $65 million a year in the city of Edmonton, taking the bad stuff and making it usable. They also work with biofuels. They also work with clean emissions. They also work with habitat, return of habitat rejuvenation back for biodiversity. So they are an oil and gas company, but they have so much more. And I think what we've got to do is not just say, I'm coming to sell, an oil rig or a bit for a drill to that company. We've got to think about how much more they need in today's society.
I know that everybody will forget what you say and they'll forget what you do, but they won't forget how you make them feel. Yeah. When you see companies like WestJet that is targeting towards delivering an experience through technology, is that what you see the future as being?
Oh, yeah. I see the future coming in several different ways. We've already, since the pandemic, moved our buying habits as individuals from goods to experiences. We've already shifted, and we've shifted at a pace we never thought we would shift as quickly. It's not that we're not going to stop buying things. We will always buy things, but our experience to us is more important than we've had before. So that's one change. Second change, our people in the labor force. We now are more open to different ways of working. And of course, I'm going to use the age-old term, digital working. We always knew we would have a digital workforce, but I don't think we thought it could come so quickly and so productively. And I can only use Alberta Innovates as an example. We put Teams as a collaboration tool into our sites, all our sites, and just before COVID. And we estimated it would take 2 years for our people to adopt the use of that tool versus Zoom versus Skype versus something else. Because of COVID, 98% of our employees, or 600 of them, adopted it within a 60-day or less period.
Wow.
So what this has done is adding the third part, velocity. The velocity of what's going on now is going at such a speed. How we keep up with it, or we don't keep up with it, frankly, how we choose the area that we need to know and dispense with the rest is going to be a big differentiator for those who have that skill. But finally, and there's many other things I could say, but the one thing that hasn't changed is leadership. It still takes a leader to step out where no people have gone before, so to speak, or to lead so that others may follow more safely. And that leadership factor has not changed. In fact, I think we probably need more, we're probably more challenged to get more leaders to step up, because very frankly, a lot of leaders have also taken the time during the pandemic and said, well, been there, done that, help folks. Perhaps it's time to exit left and kind of do something for them and their family.
Those are some hard miles, hey?
Yeah, it's, I think the other thing we shouldn't undermine is the amount of effort and time that those leaders put into protecting their firms, their customers, their people, not necessarily in that order, so don't think I've got the right order. Most of them would probably reverse the order. Their own talent and people first, their customers second, and the firm last. But the firm being an embodiment of the other two. But how much time and effort people took to try and protect and help and guide and grow the labor forces and the well-being of the customers all at the same time.
So when you take a look at leadership, because that's so important, like as somebody who is an investor, to take a look at these entrepreneurs and saying, are you developed enough as a
Yeah.
leader? Like one of
Yeah.
the things that you've said a couple of times during our time together right now is how you have to strip away all the other things. You don't get to say you're going to make a product for everybody everywhere.
No.
Because that would be like most people could never afford that. They could never afford that type of venture, right?
You have to prove yourself in one area first. And then once you prove yourself, you've also refined your skills, and then you can expand into other areas. But until you prove yourself, you don't know where, most of us don't know where we're strong or whether our strengths lie versus our lesser strengths is the way I'm going to put it. And no one of us does everything on our own. But having that guiding light in the leader, having faith, trust, respect, more valuable than any amount of money that you could give that individual.
Okay, so if I'm hearing you right, then one facet that you would look for in young entrepreneurs that you think are like investor worthy is that they have to be connected and respected.
Connected and respected, and I look to see how they treat their people. And that doesn't mean to say they have to be nice all the time. How they treat, it's not about my buddy, my friend. It's about how they treat people and how the people react to how they're treated and how they want to spend more time with that individual and want to learn more from them and want to be on their team. So look, very simply, you've probably heard this before. As an investor, I would take a B-class idea with an A-class team every day, as opposed to an A-class idea with a B-class team. Because I know the A team is going to adjust as it goes and learn on the fly and do what they need to do. And those people will grow a big and magnificent company. They will grow as big and as magnificently as they so choose.
And I couldn't agree more, because that is the right ingredients, and the idea may change. The idea likely will evolve, right?
Yeah. Dell's not a hardware company anymore. It sells more software than it sells hardware. It sold its hardware business, but it's evolved and it's still a big company. That's an example. There are many other examples where you evolve and you see where the customers are going, where the market's going, what's going to be different, how can you stand out from the crowd. So an A team who've learned the skills with a leader will adjust accordingly and they'll be able to continue on their journey. The B team won't see those things coming and they'll be surprised overnight why someone's not buying their product anymore. So, the people you're with, who they are, what you learn from them, what you give back to them, and who's your guiding light, I think is important.
I totally agree. And when you were looking at these younger leaders, I've had such a pleasure doing this podcast to talk to just incredible people like the team from Skylabs. They were a NASA iTech finalist, and these young women were they were just so poised. You could see how much training that they had done to understand going through the process.
Yeah, absolutely.
And being young people, I really respected that. And when you're seeing groups like that are emerging or potential talent, and maybe you think back to your own path in almost like gaining your stripes as a leader.
Yeah.
Is there something that you think that you would have wanted or you would want other people to focus on earlier on that path?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's an individualized question for everyone. I personally don't see barriers. I see objects in my way that I have to get around, but that's my style. Everyone has their own style. And I would say one of the pieces of advice I give is, if you're one of those leaders that are emerging, go find yourself your own personal board of directors. Go choose no more than 5 people, maybe 3. They're not your friends. but they're people you think you need to know because they have something special that you'd like to understand better. They have a skill, they have a talent, they communicate well, they're an engineer, whatever it happens to be. Don't get your first 3 to 5 buddies that you always go on vacation with, on holiday with, because they already know you and they're giving you as much as they can already give you. But go and talk to 3 to 5 people and form your own special advisory board for you and work with them and ask them questions. You'll be amazed how much people are willing to help if they're able to. Now, as an individual, I can only do that for 1 or 2 people at a time, right? But for you, you never know when you come across a problem and you're going to call one of your advisors and say, hey, I've just come across this experience. I've never had this experience before. Have you got any suggestions? Either do you know how to solve my problem, or can you suggest how I might look at it, or do you know someone I should talk to? And I think, we all like to try and help if we can. And I think Alberta is full of people who are willing to help if they're asked.
I want to know more about that. How do you see Alberta? Like, obviously, we really appreciate getting you, right? You have come from a place that has so much in common with us. Hardworking farm folk in the oil industry, a place that suffered with cyclic economy. And that was something that was you were talking about being very skilled at one thing. You are skilled now at so many things going through that process.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm excited to have you here in Alberta, but I want to know how you see here.
Thank you. Well, you're very kind, although I must admit I did say no for the first 3 times about coming here because it's a little cold in winter. People ask me, what's the difference between Austin, Texas and Alberta? I said, no difference. They're both 40 degrees C. The trouble is one is plus when it's at the worst time of year and the other one's minus. You just have to get the right combination. Joking aside, what I saw in coming here was an ability to transfer my knowledge and skills to a great group of people who can find those diamonds in the rough and take them and polish them and make it strong for the people going forward. And frankly, you guys got me hooked because you invited me to be on a board called ARIAC, which was the Alberta Regional Innovation Authority, to give some advice to ministers. And I saw a group of very brilliant people from Finland, from Germany, from everywhere. By the way, I was the American, funny with my accent, but I was the American. Give really meaningful advice of experiences from their backgrounds, their economies, their regions. But no one quite knew how to take that advice and roll up their sleeves and make it happen. So I decided that ultimately I needed to come in, roll up my sleeve, show people how it can be done. So I'm only one version of how it can be done, get people to work together and then go forward. And so that was both the challenge and the commitment I made so that we could pass those skills on, and then you guys can take them yourselves and go run with them. And I'm really pleased to say, you don't take 2 steps backwards to go 1 step forward. I think it's the opposite. And at the moment, Alberta is kicking it out the ballpark in terms of taking those 2 steps forward in actually using the skills and producing new industries and diversifying.
I couldn't agree more. I think that this is a really special time for Alberta. Mm-hmm. We can all feel it. We can feel this momentum shift.
Yeah, it is. It is a special time, and it's a really, more than special, it's a crucial time. My personal belief is we get it right now, we're going to be in a great position for the next 2, perhaps 3 generations. We don't get it right, it will be a long, slow death that none of us will want to see as our mainstay GDP, oil and gas, diminishes in demand across the world between now and 2050. So I think we're in a great position. But when I say we're in a great position, it's not an either or. It's not a make it or don't make it. It's not the oil and gas industry will be there or not there. we have to look at transformation of our industries. So while we're diversifying into new, we also need to transform our existing industries into their next generation. And I actually think they're more on top of that than we actually give them credit for publicly. But I just see the inquiries and who comes to my organization and what they're talking about and how they want to get involved. And one should be very proud of those leaders in this province at all levels, because I think we are at that crucial time. But like the plane taking off with the entrepreneur, we could get, the winds can blow and shift us, off the runway if we're not careful. We got to keep our eye on where we're going and what we need to do, I think.
Yeah, I think that was one of Newton's laws, which is an object that is in motion will stay in motion provided it's able to resist countervailing forces.
Yep.
And
Absolutely.
during a time of low momentum, we have so much risk to that.
Absolutely. But we don't have we have high momentum now.
Yes.
With diversification happening that people don't even know about, like bitumen beyond combustion. We think it could be worth between 56 and 84 billion to the province by 2030. We have startups emerging at a pace we've never seen. We've got capital being attracted at a rate we've never seen. There's so much to be proud of out there, but we can't stop now. We can't sit on our laurels and say, didn't we do good? Which is sometimes what we've done in the past. So we've got to keep going now.
And I want to call out to the other people that are kind of like me, because I'm a small business owner. I have a marketing company and a real estate company. And I take a look at where I put my resources. Like, look how many people have put all of their time and also their value into oil and gas. You can apply that anywhere. And even though I might be considered common by that, I'm also an investor into ArisMD, a company that does augmented reality in surgery, aerospace, and mining.
Yeah.
And that might seem like wild, like maybe only people in Silicon Valley do that, or like, how did you get into tech? And it's like, well, how didn't you? You should go to these places and meet these people, right? You'll want some of these ideas to survive. They'll call to you.
Absolutely. I mean, look, as I said before, it's the talent, the technology, the capital, and the know-how. It's all together. So you've perhaps acted as an advisor. You're using your communication skills to help. You've become an angel investor, of which, by the way, we need more angel investors in this province and in Western Canada.
It's a cool title.
Yeah. Hey, we want you to be an angel investor because you're believing in the entrepreneurs when they can't quite show you where they're going, but they will get there. And so this is what we need to bring these factors together. And if we can do that, which we are seeming to be able to do, if we can use that transformation of the large industries and the labor forces to actually go into some of these new industries, because they have the skills, they just have to change the way they're thinking about the use of the skill. Right?
That's what I love about our population. We have one of the youngest populations in the country. You can take that army anywhere. They're awesome. They will build you whatever you want to see.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And I think, but we have to equip that army. Mm-hmm. An army unequipped doesn't work well.
No.
An army equipped works well. An army with a leader, a general, works well. And the army that understands which battles to fight and which to not fight so they can win ultimately the war is the people we want.
Wow, that is very wise. When you take a look at those obstacles you need to get around, and you take a look at what you see is even just the next 2 to 5 years in Alberta and for Alberta Innovates, can you take us into what it would look like to win the right battles and to win the war?
Well, to be honest, I'm working on a new strategic plan for the next 5 years and not quite there yet. But I can tell you 5 years ago when I came, we said we have to do more in digital and data. That specifically included artificial intelligence, augmented reality, virtual reality, other things like that. We said we needed to do more in the ag field, and we've now brought together effectively some not-for-profits that collectively have 200 million to invest in the innovation in the ag space. When I say digital data, robotics, all kinds of areas in ag, that's the largest single pool of money in ag innovation in across Canada that we can see at the moment. We said we have to do something to help the transformation of our oil and gas industries. And I briefly mentioned bitumen beyond combustion, but there are other things. And also in the clean tech space, we're doing a lot with emissions, emission reduction, and whether that's emissions from cattle, methane, whether it's emissions, carbon, whether it's carbon capture, utilization, and storage. I mean, there's many different areas we won't go into. It's not remediation of what we have now, but also stopping the emissions in the first place. And we have technologies going in all of those. And in fact, we, in the same time frame, built the Alberta Carbon Capture and Technology Center just outside of Calgary, which is the largest carbon capture center in the country. And we will use that, or have used that, for all X Prize finalists in the carbon competition. And any company who has the need to have refined carbon and have a use for it to make carbon go from something that is bad to something that could be good. It's presently being used in many opportunities, like to strengthen concrete, give it the strength of steel, but many other applications. So we've got out and purposely done these things in the last 5 years. We think we're now positioned well for the next 5 years, and we're in the determination now of what's the next things we really need to look at going forward. So I won't lift the lid on that yet. It's a little bit too early, but sometime next year we'll be coming out with where we think our priorities are going forward.
I'm excited to hear that, because it's when you take a look at the things that you were just able to summarize, all the gains that we've made to position ourselves to do this massive value over the next 5 years, and also how you've highlighted the stakes at hand. This is so important, and it's so right now. I think that that's fantastic, and I can't wait to see what you bring to us as a plan going forward.
Well, I like to think that it's not just us bringing to you, but it's us together making this happen.
Well, that's something that I see over and over again in your example of what you've communicated of leadership here, is that when you can align the right people and get their buy-in, after that, there's so much more potential.
Absolutely. And we need to do it at all levels in our society. So we need the federal, provincial, and municipal governments to work together. We need academia, business, and government to work together. But we need to do it all level. I think we have to remember very simply, the enemy is on the outside, it's not on the inside. It's not amongst us, it's between us that we work together, so that we can compete on a global stage better than anyone else.
I don't want to say anything, because that was just such an amazing way to close this podcast.
Taylor, you are so very kind to me today.
Well, thank you so much for sharing with us. I look forward to following your story, and I want to welcome you to come back and share as your plan develops there, or anytime. I just really enjoy talking to you. I can feel your passion.
Thank you. And if I may, put on your calendar, May 31st to June 2nd, 2023, in Ventures in Calgary. May 31st to June 2nd, 2023. Be there. Perhaps you can come get some of that $250 million of output that goes on in those 2.5 days.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. This is Leadership Line of Sight, and our guest today is Laura Kilcrease, the CEO of Alberta Innovates. My name is Taylor. I'm the marketing strategist at Gravidia, and I really appreciate you coming here, as Laura shared with us what a remarkable place that we are in here in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, and what we should expect next in our tech sector. Thanks again, Laura.
Welcome.